Good morning and welcome back to pairing on Twist, or I guess live streaming on Twist, not necessarily pairing because it's just me and the cats, which might be outside the door meowing. If that happens, I'm going to have to let them in and they're going to do some pair programming with me. Last time on Twist, we were working on an invitation feature and I got stuck, as sometimes you do as a developer. This is the invitation feature here on the right hand side of the screen. What I got stuck on was this React select box where you type in a name and it was crashing due to React's rule of hooks. Let's look at that code one more time over here in the invite page. The thing that I was doing before was I was using this thing called use users query, which is a function that is provided through the types, the code generator. Oh, this is going to crash the page. It's provided by CodeGen. It generates a bunch of different types here in the source GraphQL file. It's a bit disingenuous. I was thinking to call this file types because it not just provides types, but it also provides constants like this, and then it also provides functions. Types I think is fine. I'm kind of umming and ahhing about whether or not types is the right name for this thing, but for now I'm going to leave it as types. Anyway, use users query is a function you call when you want to do a query straight away. We do something like that already down here with the use book title query, where we're returning data, loading an error, and we want to execute the query immediately. So as soon as this component starts to render, we want to execute the query immediately and then do something with the data once we get it back. In this case, we're rendering either permission denied or we're rendering the invite component, and this code is a bit long. We can actually change it to a self-closing tag instead. One sec, just gonna have some water. Okay. So use something query is when you want to do something immediately. There's another thing I only discovered after looking at this code in the afternoon after the last session, which was this lazy query thing. Now lazy query, use users lazy query is, you can see the use users query here, and there's a second function called use users lazy query. The short version of this is that it provides us a function that we can then call at whatever point we want to later on. And then it also provides a second element in this array with the data or loading and error and things like that in it as well. We're not really using those things at the moment, so I'm just leaving them out. Anyway, users query is the function that we want to call. So use users lazy query returns us this users query function, which in load options is that function we're using in the async select down here, which is informing the React select component of what options it can have. We're making this function an async function, which means that it has something that it awaits on, and it is called asynchronously. It doesn't really block the execution of the page, but we use async here so we can await on this query. And when this query finishes running, then we should have data available. So this data variable should have been updated, and data should then be available, and then we want to do this callback thing, this callback function that React Select requires us to call in order to populate elements in that data set. We then iterate over the data, the users in that data. Notice here that we're getting the types inferred for us from that types file, and we want to get the value out, which is the user ID. This is the ID of the user that we're inviting. Eventually, we will use this in a GraphQL mutation to actually link together the book and the user. You may have seen last week, I'll show you one more time. What I'm doing at the moment is I'm having to SSH into production here, which is very 1990s of me, connecting to the database and then execute an insert into statements. So the two values that I need are user ID and book ID, or at least some way of identifying the user and some way of identifying the book. Once I have those things, I can get the ID out and then join those two things together. So hopefully by the end of this session today, once I've completed the preamble and start the timer for 90 minutes, hopefully by the end of the session today, we should be able to have a mutation that inserts into this permissions table and grants any user access to any book in Twist. That is the goal for 90 minutes. So what this is now doing, this async select, when we do a load options, it's going to load stuff using that users query endpoint that we added before. we look over in the query definition, the query type definition in gee, I'm having trouble with words today. Hey, in the Ruby code, so the GraphQL definition here has a field called users. That takes a GitHub login, so you can type in a user's GitHub login here, and it will come up with that user. You select the user, it then returns the ID as well. And that's really it for now. So this async select, when we do an on change, it says select user. Select user is a function that takes a selection argument, which is this value type option base. This stuff is the type defined by, oh, I've got use effect here still. Let's remove that, hey, while we see it. The value type comes from React Select, so it's just saying this is compliant with the React Select API. Option type base is essentially a type, it doesn't really show you it here, but it's essentially option type base. Imagine it's defined like value as a string, label as a string, something of that shape. So it's just an object with a value and a label. And then that false option, we might see that a little bit later on change to true. If, for instance, we wanted to invite multiple users at the same time. So in this async select component, we can actually change it to be a multiple select, and what that will allow us to do is to invite multiple users at the same time. But we may not get there today. Or may not even want to get there today. We shall see, hey? Okay. I'm just going to stop. Be right back 1 moment. Sorry about that. I just realized that the streaming app that I'm using, an app called OBS, was reporting bad connection, and it's because I was on the wrong Wi-Fi network. So that's all fixed now. We are on the Cool Room network now, which is great, which should make everyone happy, including me, including you, and anyone watching this a little bit later on. Okay, so when we select this user from this component, what we get back is a user ID here. It's this user thing here. And that is happening through set user ID call here, which is using a state. Now what we want to happen here is when we kind of submit this form, or I guess hit an invite button, kind of two things we want to happen. I think what we should do is probably add a button at the bottom here. I've got to remember what kind of classes I use for buttons. It's very rare that I have a form in this application. I mean, oh god, that's even broken there. Okay, is that going to be broken too? Is there a smaller example? Oh gosh, everything's broken today. See? I reckon this is because these breakages are occurring because I was silly enough to attempt to upgrade the GraphQL dependency last week, and I reckon that's broken a couple of things. In the meantime, let's, in the interest of time, oh, by the way, speaking of time, let's start that timer, hey? Because the preamble's done. So 1 hour and 30 minutes. Okay. Should be wrapping at about 11:45 today. All good. Looks like we've got a button here which uses a button class with button blue, and that is probably coming from the Tailwind styles. This, yep. So I've got a button class, a BTN class, which is using some Tailwind classes. This apply directive here is white, it has a bold font, I'm sure you can read it yourself, 2 pixels border, PY is a vertical margin, and PX is a horizontal, PY2 is actually a vertical padding on inside the element, and PX is a horizontal padding. It has a rounded border, and it's display inline block, not display block. And then button blue is a button, seems to be the button that I'm using for stuff like a default submit. Okay, so what we'll do here, and in fact, why is that even a submit button? Oh, because it's inside a form. Okay, but we don't have a form in this component. So in this case, I'm just going to find a simple button. I'm using type button here because if it was inside of a form, you would have to do something like that silly prevent default thing to stop it from submitting the form, but it's just a good habit to be in. button blue, and what else did it have? I think this margin bottom was just to move it away from the element above it. Let's see, invite. Let's see what this looks like now. Invite a user back here. See, this has just got, it's just too close to the top there. So we'll go margin top to that one. There, that seems all right. So that's now, if you hover over that, changes nice colors and go radar. Yep, cool, invite. And then when we click that button, what should then happen is that mutation for inviting a user should happen. The issue that we're going to come across now is that mutation doesn't actually exist. So what we want to be able to do, let's get into an app that I love called GraphQL Playground. And I'll show you, what do we want? I think it's on 5000 GraphQL. I haven't had to write this stuff manually in a while. What we want is a mutation. And this mutation takes a user ID argument, which is a number, integer. I always forget. Everyone can't agree on what to call these things. Some people call them ints, some people call them numbers, some people call them integers. I think it's an integer. And this is angry. Do I have a history of some mutations? No. Well, let's just cheat a little bit. Hey, I'm sure I've got something in here. Yeah, that'll do. Here we go. Here's one I prepared earlier. Delete comment mutation is, oh god, it's called delete comment mutation, it's bad. We'll call this one invite user. And we have an ID, and we also want the book ID to invite the user to. So really there are kind of two arguments here. This user ID, right? And then there is book ID, which is an ID type. Okay, and the thing that we want to invite, the mutation that we want to run, so this is the name of the mutation. Really, this can be anything. This is just a way of the system identifying the operation that it's taking. The mutation can actually execute multiple things here. So I could do like ensure, I don't know, send email, or I don't know, something else. In the mutation, you can actually execute multiple different actions inside of a GraphQL mutation. Not many people do that. I don't think there's actually a case in my application where I would need to do that at the moment, but I'm just saying you can do that. All right, so we've got the invite user here. The invite user, this is the operation name, but this is the actual mutation that we want to execute here. And then this takes a book ID, which is not an ID, it's user book ID, and you know what? Let's move these because I want to know the book before I invite the user. So we find the book, and then we insert into the book's permissions table. I guess it's a join table. It doesn't really matter the order of it, right? Anyway, I think of it like book being the kind of God object in this application, where everything relates to a book eventually. Books have chapters, books have commits, books have notes, books have users, books have permissions. User ID, okay, so user ID. And the thing that we want returned out of this thing, I don't know really if there's anything necessary to be returned. Probably not in this particular case, just the same information. So we'll just get it to return the book ID and the user ID's information out of that, which I think has to be in that shape due to GraphQL's typing of that. Now, this is essentially the mutation that we want to run. This is, we want to invite a user, we have the book ID and we have the user ID, and then we want to run this query, or this operation. And that's actually not going to work. So what we should do here is go into queries here, and the thing that we want to do, let's make sure there's a mutation for it now. This is going to crack it because there's no such thing as invite user. And what I mean by crack it here, let's be specific, Ryan. What do you mean by crack it? Well, I'll show you what I mean by crack it. When I do yarn GQL cogen, it's going to fail because I'm not running in the right directory. But also, this is going to say there's no mutation. Yeah, cannot query field invite user on type mutations. So invite user doesn't exist as a mutation in the application yet. And that's kind of going to really stop us from doing much in our front end for now. So let's jump over to the back end. So close a bunch of this stuff. We'll come back to that in a bit. The mutation type is kind of where we want to begin, where we have a bunch of these different mutations at the moment, where we, I don't even know if that one's used, but people can submit notes and close notes, open notes, update notes, add comments, update comments, delete comments, that sort of thing, which is all good. Apparently some of my screen's a little bit off to the left. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kieran. That's very kind of you. Looks like I dragged the window off too far to the left. It should be a lot better now. Wow. Thank you for your kind comment, Kieran. And I will leave you a message. Oh my gosh. How long has it been like that, people? Anyway, that's very kind. Thank you. Okay, so the thing we want to add here is a new mutation, which is invite user, mutation, and mutations, invitations create, I'm guessing. Oh, there's one called add here, add comment. Oh my gosh, it's hard, isn't it? Mutations users, mutations, the object that we're creating in the database is represented by a table called permissions. Permissions isn't really represented by a model in this application. In GraphQL, it's kind of a join table. You know, I'm just going to call these invitations because there may come a time in the future where I want to be like, hey, FYI, Kieran, Ryan invited you to this book. Would you like to accept or deny? So I might just call this like invite for now. Just because it makes more sense in the grander scheme of things. I should have checked out that screen thing. That's annoying me now. I'll put that in my show notes, I guess, the prelude notes that I have here. Okay, so the mutations here, that's one thing I should mention as well. These mutations are all kind of specified as field mutation. If you remember over in query type here, I'm not doing that. What I'm doing is I'm specifying a field and then saying like these are all defined as separate functions here. The issue with that is the file gets really long. Like this is almost 100 lines long. And if I want to jump straight to like the element with notes query, then I have to kind of scroll through this thing or use, I've even forgotten the shortcut now. I'm sure it was Command R, but it's gone. Find symbol. Look at that one. That's the one I want. Elements with notes, and that will find it for me. But what would be better is having these separated out into different classes, and then I can be like, okay, I want to go to the element with notes query, and then I can find that and that like really quickly. So I kind of followed that pattern with the mutations because I think it just tidies things up a bit. Maybe I'll come back to query and do that later on, but that's and this shouldn't be called invites, it should be called invitations to match the name of it. And we want to require it up here too. So require relative, mutations, invitations, invite. Okay, that's the thing we want to require. Now we'll go invite here, notes close. And I love cribbing stuff from, saved me a bunch of times, so it's okay to copy and paste. Like, what could go wrong? The arguments we want are book ID, which is required, and user ID. The thing that we're returning is not indeed a note type. So when we're specifying types in mutations, we are saying this is the type that's being returned here by this transaction. Oh, I get to tell you about transactions too today. That's going to be interesting. Invitation type is the type that we're going to be returning. The transaction that we want to execute here is an invitations invite, and the thing that we are doing is permissions repo is the repo that we need. This is coming from, oh man, there's so much context here. GraphQL 1, I think, yep. The permission repo is this one, which repo is defined as getting these repositories. Now the repositories come from the initialize method here, Essentially, dry system is loading us a bunch of dependencies, and we can overwrite them at any particular point in time. So we can like stub out repositories and not actually make database calls if we don't need to. The couple of things we need for this context is the permissions repo and the user who's currently doing the invitation. I'm going to pass that in here, even though we're not going to use it at the moment, because later on we may want to like, maybe a book is owned by a particular user and you don't want random users inviting other users to books because they can get access to the books for free, and I try and sell these books for money, you know, that sort of thing. Not ideal. So the two arguments this takes is book ID and user ID up here, and the action we actually execute. So this kind of thing is like set up the transaction to be run, and here's all the context you need to run the transaction. And then this is the arguments. This is kind of the action of that transaction. So book ID, user ID, done, and success. Okay, so this is the mutation. We've got it defined in the mutation type. We now have a class called invite. The next thing we need is that transaction. So we have transactions close, which is this one here, which lives inside of the twist entity, transactions directory notes. So we'll create a new file here, invitations, and inside here we'll create one called invite. Invitations, invite. Now this, oh man, I forgot about steps. Steps in dry transaction, you say a transaction can go through multiple steps. So like when you're inviting a user, maybe one of the steps is like actually create the database record. And then the next step might be something like send an email telling the user they've been invited. But for now, we don't have that, so I'm just going to do invite with a book ID, and a user ID here. And the action we want to undertake here, we want to import a permission repo. I think, yeah, that should be what this is. This include here is actually defining. It's overriding initialize, and it's passing in permission repo, something like this. When we specify it over here, oh, I just noticed there's a typo. Permission repo, singular. Okay, that means then we have we can overwrite this and stub it out in our tests if we need to in the future. So permission repo, and I'm just going to call it add, or I think the permission repo may have a create. Yes, it does. Create will allow us to create. Yeah, I don't like. Create allows us to just create records. So really, what this would allow us to do is like book ID, user ID, user ID. This kind of exposes the underlying API. If I was to get rid of the create command and have to like make it go through another step. I think I'm just agonizing over nothing at the moment. That should be okay. Okay, so this is then saying to permission repo, create a new record in your database table with book ID and user ID as specified. Now we've hooked up this code. So we've got the mutation, number one. When we've added invite user, we have a mutation class, which then takes the book ID, user ID, and builds a new transaction out of that. We then return, what are we returning out of that? Oh, this is why we should have TypeScript in Ruby, hey? This permission repo create will be returning that join table record, so it should have book ID and user ID. We'll see that in a second. Just close some of these other tabs. So that should be okay. More water. I guess the next thing to do is test it out. So we'll do a spec here, and I'm going to steal crib from close note mutation because great artist steal or something like that. The invite user mutation, we don't have a note repo, we have a permission repo. I can see, and this is the kind of stubbing I was talking about, where I'm saying like this is actually a kind of, in fact that should be instance double. We saw that last week. Instance double, the difference is that instance double will complain if a method is missing on the, on the class, where double will not. The repo that we have here is a permission repo, which is permission repo, and the mutation that we have, thankfully, we have over here, and I can steal that and put it here. A very helpful ability to do that, which is very nice. This doesn't pass in any variables, so I think what this is doing before, yeah, it's just passing in an ID. One thing I'm noticing here is we don't actually have a book, so does that permissions table have, wow, it's a lot of different, oh dear, should probably get rid of that table. Goodbye. Okay, it's currently open, fine. I'll come back to that in a second, that's my old work. What we should do here is verify that the structure, not the structure, the DDL, yeah, okay. User ID and book ID. So this table has a reference to the users table and the books table, which means that if we are going to be, look how good poster code is, I really should give it money. If we're going to be running this thing in a kind of more, in a test that doesn't stub out the permission repo, when we create that permission, we're going to need to also have a book record existing and a user record existing. So for that reason, I think we'll do a new GraphQL request spec here just to make sure like it all works correctly too. It does not close a note, it invites a user. And we have invite user with a book ID of 1 and user ID of 2, just to give it some separate values. I think they need to be quoted because they are IDs. ID type in GraphQL are always strings. It's not note repository, it's permission repo to receive create with book, you know what, I can probably just do this, book ID 1, user ID 2. And what it returns is a permission object. I don't even know if I have a permission object, to be honest. Well, I guess we're going to find out. User ID 2, the thing we want to run is this particular, it's not a query, but it's an operation. We'll call it a query. I think it's called query anyway. The data that gets returned is an invite user object. It has a book ID like that, and it has a, oh, that's not a note either. That's an invitation, and that's a user ID, and that is 2. Okay, so we've got this invite. Anything in here refers to note. No. All right. Copy that relative path, although I think it's going to be broken in that it has the backend directory there. So what I'm going to do here is use my friend fzf to find the file. fzf does that, so you can do Control T when you have fzf installed, and it brings up this thing. And the test we want to run is called invite user spec. And that will now run. This is now failing because we don't have an invitation type on. Okay, that is saying the mutation, invitations, invite. So that is this, not that one, but it's this one. Invitation type doesn't exist. So the object that we're specifying here doesn't exist. We'll create one. In fact, the object that's now being returned, I guess, is not the invitation type. It's like a, it's so painful because the thing, the object that's being returned from the database is a permissions record, but the mutation that I'm executing here is like inviting a user. I'm going to call it invitations because it's already there. It just bothers me that it really bothers me in an application when you use two names for exactly the same thing, because what can happen is you end up talking about it with another developer. You're like, oh, the invitation code is broken, and you're like, yeah, but the permission code is broken. You both end up like talking about what you think are two different things because you're using two different names, but actually you're talking about the same thing, and there's so much cognitive overhead to that. It's almost like speaking two different languages. Like, I'm on the weekend I drank a cerveza, or I drank a beer. You're talking about literally the same thing, but because you're using two different names, there's like that little bit of extra cognitive overhead, and that's such a bugbear of mine. I just don't enjoy it. So enough ranting. Let's get to implementing this stuff. It turns out I don't actually drink cervezas. I hate the taste of beer. Book ID is a string. Oh my god, I probably lost some followers over that comment. Hey, don't care. This can null false here and user ID. So when we get back this invitation type or permission type, when we return data out of this, it's going to be these fields, book ID and user ID. They can never ever be null. What's the point of having an object in the permissions table where it's like book ID is set or user ID is not set? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. That is failing because I feel like I require a bunch of those stuff somewhere. You know, if this was Rails, it would do it all for me, right? Ha 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 ha. It would also cause me a lot of frustration and pain too when I'm trying to pick apart this code. All right. Looks like the mutation is running, but the invitation that's being returned from that is failing. And what I'm going to do is move that over there, and what we'll do here is let's narrow it down to just this thing. So the thing we're returning is this permission object. We then get back an invitation, and really I'm not really testing for the success or failure of this query here. So I bet like, yeah, it's erroring out. Invite user is missing required arguments, book ID and user ID. Well, it ain't though, because it's getting them there and there. I guess because it's requiring some variables. What did we look at last week? It was the users spec, this thing, which passed in a bunch of variables. So I'm guessing it's like that. You know what we'll do is this. We'll do, because I'm specifying it on the mutation here. The mutation itself is expecting it, but I can, if I'm specifying them manually, I don't need to do that. Yeah, I remember. I remember now. There's just so much like stuff you need to remember these days in coding. It's not just like CGI interfaces anymore. Field in that user is still missing required arguments. Well, I'm giving them here and here. No. And that's using a variable. You know what? Let's just use variables because it's kind of that'll more align with the actual query that we're running. So we'll do user ID here. You know what's probably something else that I'm doing silly. Book ID is 1, user ID is, I'll come back to that in a second. Let's make them match up neatly. ID, crap. You know, it's probably that those are I capital D, and these are like book. Well, see, that's lowercase d there, and I reckon it's a capitalization issue. That would be incredibly funny and frustrating. Capitalization doesn't matter until it does. That's okay, and we got user ID here, which is also a string. Okay, we'll give it another spin. Oh no, syntax error. But I'm supposed to be a senior developer. I don't make syntax errors, do I? Oh, I'm funny. Alright, this thing is receiving book ID with in numbers and user ID with a number as well, but really it's expecting to receive it with strings. See, this is the capitalization thing all over again. Like, computers cracking it because there's a type difference here. It's essentially the same data. It's just either a number or a string. Assembly programmers probably just had an aneurysm when I said it's the same data. That's alright. I'm not here to appease the assembly programmers. I'm here to appease you, the loyal viewers. All of you. Whoa, no, not there. The place I want to create is entities. So the issue here is that there is a missing kind of base class for these permission stuff, and really we just need to create one. So I'm going to crib this here and go permission. Yes, I don't have Rails G here, so I have to go through the laborious effort of copying and pasting stuff. Oh no! Oh, it's terrible. Oh, it takes so long. Oh no. Oh no, we're done. Okay, good. I'm in a bit more of a trolley mood today, you may have noticed. Okay, so this query executes and we get back this data, so then the test should pass, which is great. So at least stubbing out the permission repository here works fine for us. Okay, so we've got a mutation running here in GraphQL mutations. The probably next best thing to do is this thing. Currently I've got a bunch of queries here. These are, you know what, I'm going to move them into a different directory because they are queries, and I want to create a new directory here called mutations. And that should be under GraphQL, not under that. And I'm going to encrypt some more stuff here. All right. No. We'll call this one invite user spec RB. All right. Invite user. So the thing we want to do is create. This is a transaction to create a user. We are now creating a user within our application. We only need one user to exist. And we want to also, I believe books might have a way of creating books. Look at that, it does. So the two transactions we want to execute are creating user and creating book to start off with. This test mentions Rails 4 in action. Remember that? It's currently, I use it every day. In fact, I use that book every day as a monitor stand. It's really helpful because it's just really thick. It's like 600 pages thick. It's great. It does such good things. The sequel is Active Rails. Go out and buy it. The thing we want to do is create users, create books. We've got a book here and we've got a user here. We're calling those transactions, and then we should better do that. The query we want to execute is we will borrow from invite user spec, which is this thing. Oh, I love the portability of this stuff. It just is so good. Like, just do that. The variables we want to provide are the book ID, which is coming from book ID, and the user ID, user.id. We've got the queries, we've got the variables, we've got the user. The user is inviting themselves. Maybe we should have had indeed two separate users. Let's say user 1 and user 2. Other at example.com. Other user, GitHub login is Ghost. Oh, that's a little reference. When you go to github.com/ghost, this is the user that GitHub has. If you delete your account, if you rage quit GitHub, they replace your account with this one. And so every like issue and repository, or I guess not repository, but pull request gets tied to this user. Fun fact. So we're going to invite Ghost here. User1.id, the user that we're inviting is 2. You know what? Let's call these proper names. Hey, always better to use proper names in this sort of thing. So we'll say radar here and Ghost here. And you know what? I'm probably doing user somewhere else. No, surprising. Okay, so the variables we're passing, book ID and that. The data we should get back out of this, you know what, is invite user, and then we expect invite user, not the GitHub login, but the book ID to equal book ID to s, because ID here is going to be a number, and we need to stringify it because that's what it gets back from the database. And you know what we can do is probably, I remember the shortcut, it's command, sorry, no, it's not command, it's shift option down. And I did the duplication. User ID, okay, so when we run this query on a real database with real users and real books, it should then invite the user. Okay, this one's called invite user spec, and it's invite user spec, it's the requests one. We run this one, it succeeds, it's great, everyone's happy, but no. Okay. Let's see what's going on. Invite user here. Empty. Well. Expected value not to be null. Well, it was. I reckon, you know what, it's probably these variables it ain't happy with. Those should probably be book ID and user ID, at a guess. My guess is based on the user spec. See how this is GitHub capital L login? So it's probably requiring those to be the same shape. Invite user, and there we have it. So this is the book ID from the database and the user ID. Good, everything's happy. Great success. All right, that is probably enough of the back end. So now we've got invite user mutation. Sorry to bang the mic. Invite user mutation here. Yeah, and that. There. I noticed this has got an underscore in it, but let's verify it again. The user that we're inviting is Ghost. See, I was using user somewhere else. Right there. All right, much better. What we'll do here is we will add in a bunch of the backend stuff here. Kind of want to do that in 2 separate commits because we removed the twist web request GraphQL book. Any smart about it, are you? Okay. And the other thing we removed is the spec here as well, and I missed a quote. And then what we did is we added twist web requests GraphQL queries. And there we go. So that stuff, move book and users query specs to their own directory. All right, that is the first thing we did. The second thing we did was, is that just going to add in? Yeah, good. So this is kind of all the invitation code that we have. I don't know why that got modified. I fixed a bug there earlier in the week. All right, we won't add that. What we'll do, I think, then is do add dot, and then we'll do git checkout twist web GraphQL objects book, or reset, not checkout. Okay, that should unstage those changes. That's good. Permissions, invitations, mutation type, mutation, invitations, invite, objects, invitation, mutation, invite, user spec, and that is good. Then the other changes are the latest commit change in book, and the front end change is good. Add invite user mutation. All right, that's the backend done. Now, when we make these changes to our backend, the other thing we need to do is to dump the GraphQL schema, which we do with this command, and Rakes is still having an issue this week. That's okay, Rake, I understand. Sometimes I have bad days too, like last week when I got stuck. That's all right. We move forward on this stuff, and we just keep going. Eventually, we do get unstuck most of the time. Oh yeah, ask other people for help, and they unstuck us. Unstuck us. Okay, just going to remove that code. Now we have generated the schema dump here. The issue that we had on the front end when we ran yarn GQL code gen before was that the mutation was missing. Mutation now exists. It should be okay, except the queries here is using the wrong argument. It needs to be book lowercase d and lowercase d, lowercase d, lowercase d, lowercase d, lowercase d, and everything should be happy again. There we go. Now this, from the schema dump and having the query here in types.ts, we will now have function use invite user mutation. So this is the function we can do. We can call eventually to get out the data. In fact, we can actually see a good example of it right here. So I'm going to steal that. When we click this button, this is when we kind of want to execute that. Mutation. So on click invite user, and we want to do invite user here. And there's our commented out code. You know what, I'm just going to not, is there a way to, I want to kind of crib that without the comments. I'm going to mess it up if I do it, so I will do it the long way. I'll use this one. Use user invite mutation, yes. Yes, I do want to import that. And the thing it gives us is these two things. So it's similar to like the lazy query in that you can call it at any particular point later on. So what I'm going to do up here, I reckon, is do a const this, and this will get us invite user. I don't know if we actually need to actually use any data from that, because once we've succeeded, it should be okay. Use invite user mutation like that. No, we're not actually using it anywhere. We should be using it down here. So this is kind of like the lazy query where we call it when we actually, all the data, we know the data that we want. So invite user mutation, and the data that we want to pass this are the variables. And right now we have in this code access to the user ID, but I don't believe we have access to the book ID yet. All we have is this book title. So we'll fix that up in a moment. User ID is user ID. Look at that capital D. I like capital ID because it's just is a habit I've been gotten into. This is missing book ID, so we need to have book ID here. Book ID for the mutation. Doesn't get book ID passed in here, but it should get it from its parent component. So we'll do that here. Book ID is a string. This is now failing because we're not passing in book ID, so passing book ID here, which is data book.id. The query doesn't return. The query for wrapped invite here, use book title query, does not return an ID. So use book ID and title query. We're going to rename that query to use book ID and title query, and we should get back both of those things. The name of this query is here, so use book ID and title. So that use book ID and title need to match up to that, which I believe they do. Yep, looks good. The thing we want to return is a book with a title and an ID. We can run that again. And then we should have use book ID and title query. Oh, lowercase Ryan. Everyone's got opinions about the capitalization, and this no longer exists. This doesn't exist. The book title query doesn't exist. Where were we using that? Here, so it's book ID and title query. Then that needs to get imported there. So that is now saying the shape of the data that's being returned is either this book object, you can see here, it's this book object with ID and title, or it's this permission denied object with just the error. Now, book ID is being passed here, book title is being passed there. We have invite receiving book ID and title. We have our invite user mutation successfully inviting users. I don't know if this supplies a then, looks like it does. You know what we'll do is a console log response on that thing. Let's do that. What that will do is then when we click that button, it should then invite the user and to the correct book. At the moment, we only have one user in our database locally, which is not that great because we want multiple users. Let's go back over here and we'll go to, I don't know why it defaults to that database. Books development users. In fact, we have a couple of users. It looks like a couple of those GitHub logins are blank. I'll delete those. Thank you. And I will add in another one here. RyanBig.com. Don't need a password. Don't need to create that. Don't need a name. Other Ryan. And I'll call this one Twist Books. That's a Twist Fetcher, I think is the GitHub name that I have there. Is this going to be heavy? Oh no, created at can't be blank. Okay, we'll cheat. Now, and save. I'm sure there's probably a shortcut for that I'm missing. All right, so we've got a new user. They don't have a password, but they do have a username called Twist Fetcher. When we invite this user, what we should see then is in the permissions table over in Books Development Permissions is that we should see a new record here with the user ID of 5, but right now we don't because we haven't actually run the damn thing yet. Okie dokie. Let's refresh this page. So we should be able to see Twist Fetcher. There it is. There's the user. We click the button and it fails. Field invite user doesn't exist on type mutations. Aha! This is one thing that I don't get with my application that I do get with Rails, is that it will automatically reload the code for me. What I've done here is I've added a couple of classes, but the system, once it's booted, doesn't actually load those classes, and so we need to restart here. I'm sure there is a way to do it, but right now there is, I don't really care one way or another for the auto reloading, because I don't really change the backend that often at the moment. It really bother me, but let's try this again. Twist fetcher. Okay. Invite. Now it doesn't actually do anything like according to the front end, but on the back end, if we refresh this page, we now have user ID and book. So if that twist fetcher user was to log in here, they would now have access to the book. Really, we should probably do something here like, hey, you have successfully invited a user. So that's probably like the next step here, is like show something that you've successfully invited a user, or have like a way of, I don't know, like the users that have currently been invited to this book over here on the right hand side. I'm not sure what. You know what? Let's just display a message next to that invite thing. Like, yeah, that was successfully invited. So we'll say set message invite sent. Okay. Const set message. No, message set message. Use state as a string. Give some sort of feedback on the UI at least. That's like, yeah. Tailwind CSS.com. What I want is colors. I know they have a lot of good colors. No. Button green, text green. That's probably something like what I want there. So what we'll have is like a span after that button, which is like class name, text green 500, and then the message. Reason why I'm using set message here is maybe the user has already been invited. Like there's nothing on this UI, right, that's like, hey, you can't insert, like that's not working. That's a bit, is it 600 that I want? Yeah, so 600, the higher the color, the darker it goes in. See, it's a bit darker there. Probably 600 is good, and we want a margin left 2 on that. Push it away a little bit. So that is now indicating the invitation has been sent to Radar. But if we refresh this table, what you see is there's like multiple records being inserted into the database. Then when you go to read that stuff out, what you might end up is like with a user list of having multiple users appearing. Sorry, the same user appearing multiple times in the list. Yeah, I think that's okay. I guess, like, do we want a way of like displaying the list of invited users on the side there? Probably we do. Like, we kind of want to have a way of saying like these are the currently invited users, and then when we do that query, we don't want to display users that have already been invited. Interesting. Okay. That is a good thought. Yeah, so you can kind of invite users that have already been there. All right. So what I'm imagining here is we have this. This is the kind of half component here. That's the invite. That's this thing on the left, and then on the right we have this list of users. Or yeah, I guess we could have like book members. There should be probably a way of removing users at the same time, if you don't want somebody to have access to the book anymore. All right, I'm gonna take a break for a bit. I'll be back in about 5 minutes, and we will keep going then. See you in a bit. And I'm back. All right. So the couple of things that we were looking at on this feature is that we are allowing users to be invited multiple times, which is not ideal. So like if a user has already been invited, like their name shouldn't appear here. The other thing is that like, I think if we were to like limit the list of users here, it may seem nonsensical if there wasn't already a list of users displayed here. It's like, hey, FYI, the user you're trying to invite has already been invited. Like, so let's add on the other side of that, like a different, you know what? It's probably a separate component. Like there is the invite here, which is being rendered. Yeah. This is probably, just trying to think where that, you kind of load all the options for the query there. We have the book title and book ID being passed down, and that is kind of this in the component here. Right, and you kind of want two of those components. So really like this exists on the outside here, and that is the query wrapper for the invite stuff. And then there is also, this can be a fragment now. It's just basically a div. And then the thing we want is kind of the, you know what we'll do is two divs here, why not? You can do divs, you can do fragments, you can do whatever you want really. Yeah, it's pretty flexible like that. The other thing we want here is bgy. You know what? I'm repeating this a bit. Is there such a precedent for it already? Here, yeah, main. Main, what a shocking name. Main. Main is really not a good name for that thing. It's more like a card, an area, a box, yeah, I'm just not sure what. With 1/4, is that going to be? No. I think this component needs, and I don't know why I'm quoting them like that. That quoting is only if you want to like interpolate some values. It seems a bit silly to add in extra characters when you don't need them. Probably flex will do the right thing, and then gap 2, is that? Yeah, that's more like it. So what we're going to have here is like, maybe like a third instead, just to make it a bit wider. Yeah, I don't know. What we'll do here is like user, or like readers, and something like that. And then underneath that, what you have is a list of your list of readers. So you have like li, radar, big, and then you have twist, fetcher, twist. They appear like that. Maybe with your little list disk. Is that? Yeah. List inside, I think, is the start. Yep. So you have these sort of reader things here, and then maybe you have like a little X next to them to remove them. But at least that kind of shows you the data that you have already associated with the book, and then when you hide these options based on who's already in the book, then who's already a reader, then you don't. You know what? That title now is annoying me. It's not inviting a user; it's inviting a reader. We have invite a user there as well. Invite a user. It's not inviting a user. Users are the internal name. It's more like invite a reader. There. So we have markdown book test. We have reader. Okay. So we kind of have the outline of that component now. We have a kind of generalized idea of what they are. Guess I'm just trying to think where we can start here. The query wrapper here is for wrapping an invite. Now that is, this is kind of like the one component to get the book information and kind of render this bit. I kind of want to separate that out as like wrapped invitations. Like, all right, what we'll do is this just as a test. Let's see. Doesn't take any arguments, and the thing that it returns, get your syntax right, Ryan, is a function component like this that is then returning a div, and then that has the thing that actually gets returned here is not wrapped invites and invitations component, and that then returns the wrapped invite on one side. Oh, because it's not actually, it doesn't, there, all right. Yeah, no, this thing's failing because it doesn't have any route props, so we will do that here. This thing does actually need props now, which is invitations props, and the invitation props, and that needs to be like route component here. Just like that and that. Then wrapped invite here gets a book permalink. Book permalink here, which needs to come from the book permalink from the props that gets passed in there. That, oh, I deleted that. Whoops. Invite props are this sort of thing with a book permalink, which is definitely a string. And that's now going to render the right thing. And what this then allows us to do is to say like the readers go on the other side of that. So the readers are kind of like this. Yeah, this needs to go here. Flex gap 2 goes here. That goes there. Get rid of that. And then this wrapped invite component kind of, ooh. Yeah, that's better. I don't know what happened there. It's missing for a moment. The wrapped invite component is then just all about wrapping the invite form itself, and really this should probably be renamed to like invite form or something like that. Okay. Then what we can do is move this. Okay, that is, yeah, so this is probably then grounds to like rename this over to index.tsx. So this is like the form for doing all the index. Oh, golly gosh. Okay, it is fine with that. Invitations, and then what we have here is like all this stuff for inviting a user. This sort of thing lives over in a separate file called invite form.tsx. Let's call it that. Without the C on the end. And then we have invite form props, invite form. And yeah, I'll get to you in a second. Wrapped invite form. That doesn't take route components anymore because it just takes the book permalink. Query wrapping invite. Yeah, okay. So that's now going to be like complaining because there's like a heap of stuff here that is no longer used. So move that over here since we know that that's where it's used, and then we want the use state. We kind of want importing React and use state here. That should make most of it happy. Then this is wrapped invite that, and then this is exporting wrapped invite form. All right, default wrapped invite form. Then wrapped invite form is this, and we're not using use state anymore. See, this makes this file a lot easier to read now, which is really handy. Route component props are still used. I like importing React first since it's like the basis for everything we do in this application. And we want to import the invite form from invite form right there. What is that? Well, just, it's a string. I'm telling you, it's a string. All right. Yeah, we got the pass set already. So then all the invite form stuff kind of lives over here, and then the reader stuff lives over in this other file. So we'll, I guess, create a component called readers now. Like this. There we go, and we'll create this one called this readers.tsx. We'll import React here from React And then we want to do const readers is a function, is a React FC, which takes readers props. We will need like book permalink or something out of here to get the information. But for now, we are just type readers props here. Okay. The thing that we're returning then is this. And we want to export readers. Default, Ryan. And we want to then import readers here. That. Okay. And we kind of want to do the same thing here because that's what we're using. When we navigate to this page, the information the page has to make queries to the database is just this permalink. It doesn't have an ID, so we kind of want to send that through. I don't like that we're calling book permalink as string twice, but for now I think it's okay. Since we know this is going to need to load some data from the database, you know what? Let's just do it. Book permalink a string for now, and at least that's the kind of like structure that we want. When we do a query to a book, we want to find all the users that have been invited for that book. And then fetch them out here. So we'll follow that same pattern again, which is like wrapped readers. This then takes the wrapped readers props. And then it allows this component to be really dumb. It's like, well, we just received this data here, just render it. I like that we're kind of separating out the database querying logic from the presentational logic, kind of like the MVC pattern in Rails, just without the C, I guess. No real controller here to speak of. The queries we want to execute now. This is just annoying because this is like multiple queries that are used for one page. You know what I'm tempted to do is just like move these over into here. Like FYI, these are the queries that are all used for this component. I just don't know. I just don't know. It feels bad because we're like, this is model. I'm doing air quotes. You can't see it, but I'm doing air quotes. This is model code, and then this is like view code down here. Other than that, I can't think of like you could do invite form queries. No, you know what? I'm just going to leave it like that until I can think of a better way. And that was importing GraphQL from Apollo client. It's the same thing. It's not really that long. It's like 130 lines long, but still, oh, so much agony going on here. So much agonizing going on here. I guess if we're following that sort of pattern here, what we'll do is this, and we'll build a query eventually for this wrapped readers component. This takes in that book permalink. So this thing doesn't really take in, like it takes in readers here. Will take in a list of readers. So really, this is now wrapped readers props, readers props, which takes in that. This then returns a query. No, it doesn't. It does. Data loading error of use readers query variables book permalink, like that. And then the thing we want to return here is a query wrapper, which does this shape here. Well, we do want to check out for that permission denied code as well. What we want to do is like render, rename that, render readers or permission denied. Notice there's a lot of red in this code at the moment. That's mainly because we haven't actually written the readers query yet. So use readers query doesn't exist at the moment, and really, yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. We'll get to that in a moment. So readers query is this thing gets returned, permission denied. We can fix. We're going to import that. The thing we want to return is a list of readers, and the readers are the data that we get back. So readers is like probably data readers or something like that. The query wrapper component we can fix by importing, and then we have wrapped readers, which gets exported. Wrapped readers is here. Then we're returning readers to this component. So we got not import the type. readers props, which is then readers, which is an array of reader type objects. I don't know what that represents. Probably like user objects. We'll get to that in a bit. Really what we should look at is this readers query stuff. So the thing we want to do here is to build up this query. It's called readers. It takes a book permalink, and yeah, I guess it can be called permalink. And what we want to do is like, when we get back a permission denied error, then show the error. Otherwise, we display the book. Now we don't care about the ID and title of that because we already have that on the page from the invite form wrapping, I guess. What we do want is like the list of readers. We want their GitHub login, and we want their name information at least. For now, this cannot find GQL. Yeah, I know you can't. So this is kind of the query, the shape of the query that we want, and then from that we want like the readers that have got that information. Hopefully you're still with me there. Let's see over here. Yeah, okay. Front end's not gonna be happy. So again, we kind of need to write this query ourselves in the backend. So I'm gonna crib this over here. And what we'll do is go into user spec. We ran, this is the one that stubs out the user's query. So this is kind of like the same sort of data we're going to be returning, a very similar shape of data. The thing we're going to be returning is like book readers spec, like naming stuff like the kind of context of book readers. Like this, the user repo we're going to be returning is probably that's fine. The query that we get, I just lost it. It should be readers. It's this thing here. Here it's fine. We get like the book permalink. The book find. I feel like this is going to need to do a book query to determine. Yeah, it's probably going to try and do a book repo call as well. Kind of need two repositories here. We need to get access to the book and access to the user as well. I'm not sure what argument book repo receives yet, so let's just do this. Fetches the users for the book. The variable is a permalink, which is like active rail or something like that. The users that get returned, is it users? No. It would be inside the book and we call it readers. So the top level thing that we're returning here is a book object, and that's either a permission denied or it's a book object. It should be okay. The readers that we get out of here, readers, I keep referring to them as users, don't I? Readers for the book. And this is the kind of that double name thing where we're using two different names. So it like the name is hello, Robin. I just saw your comment in YouTube there. The readers, this is the two different names thing. So we're using users and readers. The readers are the, not just all the users in the application. So maybe it is contextual. Like we want all the users for the book. And the way that we say that they are the users for the book is if they are readers of the book. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. It's good. We'll copy this and we will run it over in our test, over in backend. So the book readers, you know what, I'll just do this instead. BER. Okay, the readers that are being returned, this, again, really should have something that wraps this and like checks for errors. But the readers doesn't exist in type books on the query type. So query type, when we return this thing, it's going to return a book permission check result. And I don't know actually if that's going to return the right thing. Yeah, readers doesn't exist on type book. This book permission check type, book permission check result is either going to return a book type or a permission denied type. This looks like it's returning a book type. So we go to book type over here, and now we want to define readers. So we go field readers is user type. This association is never null, and the argument this takes is that it doesn't really have an argument. It's just like, get me all the readers of this book. Okay, we have notes readers. These are not really defined in any particular order whatsoever. Readers of the book are context of user repo. Kind of want to do a join. Essentially what we are returning are users for by book object ID. Okay, so the readers that we're actually returning is this from the context of the user repository by book. Yeah, find by permalink. That's the one that we are failing. Just up here, expect book repo to receive find by permalink with active Rails and return a dummy book. I think we have a dummy book. This book ID1 title active Rails. Okay, all good and happy, I think. Book new permalink. Okay, so this is requiring permalink as well. Active Rails. When I'm defining it. User authorized for book called on null repository, placeholder for permission repository. This is saying like, is the user authorized to get that book? Yeah, well they should be. So what I should be doing is doing permission repo here. This is that permission check that's undergoing that happens when we run the any book query. The permission check needs to say that yes, this user is able to access this book at this point in time, and then I can see the list of book readers. To receive, what does it receive? User authorized by book. User authorized by for book, and return true. Okay. I think next week we'll probably look at like the permission stuff for this, because at the moment like users can invite any user, and that's just not ideal at all. I mean that's like parlor level security right there. That whole debacle is quite hilarious at the moment, I think. Like able to enumerate through IDs and grab data, like it's a bit silly. Alright, we run this query, we get out a bunch of users. This is now saying can't find the user repo. The user repo's method by book. Go over to user repo and we'll add in that thing. So we want to say like def by book, and we have a book ID here. Just receives that, and then we want to do users by book ID. Now we could do database calls directly in the repository, but in RUM it's generally better to do them in the relation instead. So the relation is, here's one I prepared earlier. I showed you last week where we do this kind of join, not join, but this where query, and the complicated stuff is in the notes relation. But in the notes repo, which is this one, what you have is just this simple call here. Kind of, this is the barrier between Ruby and the database, and then once we get the database data back out into Ruby shape, then we can do some Ruby manipulation to it. So that's kind of the similar style of stuff we're doing here. I wonder if I'm going to need to use joins in this code. Do I use join somewhere else? Yeah, that's just a view query. That's for creating, looks like that'll be the right shape of data that I want. This is going to require some finagling, I think. Fancy term for Ryan doesn't know what he's doing. By book, by book. Book ID. Let's do binding apply there, and you know what we'll do is we will do bin console. And this will then allow us to get, did we have something in here? Felt like last week we kind of looked at something like repo. Yeah. User repo equals. Yep, cool. So that gets us out the user repository, which is the information we want. And then we do user repo by book, and we do one. And that'll get us like into that binding apply prompt. What we want to do here is like join permissions, and the thing we're joining is user ID. Kind of like Oh no, it's book ID, isn't it? Book ID, book ID. And we want to say, is it that? So that's selecting all the users, inner joining permissions, where the permissions. I'm curious as to like what that query actually returns. So in this case, we want like all the users who are only in book 1 or 2, right? So that the query we want to do is like select all from users, but that'll get us all the users, but we only want, at the moment I think indeed I think that the users are both in, both have access to that book. Let's say we only want the users who have access to book 1 or book 2, okay. Let's say we remove, you know what, I'm going to remove that one. Save changes. Okay, so now only user 1 has access to both books, so either book we do a query on, it won't matter, but so we want select all from users, we want to then inner join permissions on permissions dot book, not book ID, yeah, book ID I guess is equal to 1, which gets us all the users, which is not right. Book ID is equal to 1. Yeah, it got us back both, like, did I not save that change? Like, that doesn't make sense. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm being a goober. User ID is equal to user ID, where permissions book ID is equal to 1. There, that's better. It must be coming up on lunchtime. I'm making some silly, easy SQL mistakes. No worries. Really, this is the query we want. So we want to like join the users table where permissions user ID is that, and then we want to say like only get me the rows where we have a user and the book ID is of this one, and then we should have the right shape of that. So what I should probably do here is like that, I think. So that's like inner join permissions on those two things. That's right. And then where book ID is book ID. So then where book ID is 1. I feel like there's a way of doing this. This is like to SQL, to S. No. LS. LS gives us in Pry gives us all the methods that we can use on this. So what I'm looking for is like a SQL way of like. Don't see one at the moment. That's all right. We will find one, I'm sure. There's an inspect. I don't think that will give us exactly what we want. Nope. This data set. S. No. Maybe it's on that. That's a lot. Truncate SQL. Nope. Oh, there's a SQL. It's just SQL. Data set. SQL like that. No LS. Yeah, sort of the right shape that we want. This is then select all the... Oh, SQL's doing... Or ROM is doing a clever thing where it's just finding the fields we want. Inner join permissions on permissions where book ID is equal to the user's book ID. Order that. That's just the join. And then we do where book ID is book ID. Data set SQL. And then that's got the right where query. Great. So what we do here is join. I'm typing it out again. I've got the right code here. That. Join permissions and then where. Like that. So we kind of want to do two. Oh, what's complaining about hanging dot probably. Thanks, Rubicop. You're being very incredibly unhelpful. Bloody pedant of a thing. Despite my big gigabit connection, your font is hard to read because of how much eagerly artifacts when the video stream undergoes YouTube compression. Well, yeah, I guess something's doing compression. I'll have to watch back. Thanks for the comment, Johnny Lee. Okay, the user repo is doing a query here, which is not by GitHub login. In fact, it is by book. And should only return one user, so the ID it receives is 1. Oops, that's the user's spec. That's not the right test. Book readers spec. Jump back here. By book 1. That's an easy mistake to make, hey? Oh, it got 1. 1 unquoted. Looks like we've got about 10 minutes left on the timer here, so we should be able to at least get like the readers reading back out there. I'm happy with that. That seems to be like in the right shape. So there is now a query. If we do dump the schema out here. Yeah, I reckon next week we'll look at some sort of permission stuff like what should happen if a user attempts to invite another user and it fails. I think that'll be really handy. Let's do GQL codegen here. And we now have, over in types.ts, we should have use readers query. There it is. And that's our query that we've just added in. Let's go back to our front end code now, and we will go to readers.tsx. This should be a little bit easier now because we can do this. And that now doesn't take permalink. It probably just takes permalink. Doesn't take book permalink. Just takes regular permalink. The readers query. This is not being imported, so we can import that. The readers, yeah, because it's book readers. Notice TypeScript's preventing me from being a bit silly. It's really handy. The readers we want to get out here. This is, I've got two things. Readers type. Readers type is, I've got the type we want to pull out here is like a pick of. Did I do this in chapter before? Yes, I did. Yeah, it's like this. You want to just pull out the. So we've got the readers query. The thing we want to pull out of that is the book. Book readers. But this will fail because there's two types being returned here. There's either a book or there is, yeah, that's more like what I want. There's either a book or a permission denied object. So the thing we want is like the readers query. This is the readers query book. Then we go readers query book, and we only want. Oh, look, that's already going to get book for us. Okay, so this is saying like when readers query returns a thing that's a book and it has a type name of book, then we want to get the readers out, and that's going to match like the correct readers type, and then it's all going to be in the right format. Wow, we are almost done with this thing. It's pretty awesome that this is just enabled like so much to be done already. Oh my gosh, I'm loving it. Readers. Okay, from here we want to put the UL up here. Then we have a list of readers here. We go here, UL. Missing a bracket right there, and then the LI goes here. And we want to then extract out the GitHub login and the name out of the user and put them right here and here. GitHub login. See how like easy this is now that I'm not getting stuck, and how it all just like kind of snaps together. It's really awesome. Oh no, unterminated string. Fill readers doesn't exist on typebook. This is because we haven't restarted that server. We'll now restart that server, hey? Looks okay on 1080p here, thanks Kieran. Yeah, I guess my font is small or something. I am streaming on my 30-inch screen just because it's easier for me. That is okay. What we're seeing here is looks to be a SQL error occurring just when that query runs. This is a perfect case for a regression test. So what I've done is I've written a test already in readers spec over here, which kind of stubs out all those calls and doesn't actually hit a database. But that is bad now because when it actually hits the database in like development mode, it's gonna well, it's trying to do this wrong shaped query. So let's wow, I thought we were good. I shouldn't have tempted fate there. I said, look how easy it all snaps together. Yeah, well, until it breaks. All right, book readers. We have this. We have a user that gets created. We have a book that will get created as well. This is books create here, in fact. And we go let one book. And we go do create book. I feel like I did this already today. No, this one. Perfect. I will steal that. Thank you very much. We're creating a book there. Then we want to do a create permission, add permission, something like that. Permission add. Transactions. I guess it's this one. I thought I had a different one for it. I guess not at the moment. Invite. So we've got a user, then we want to have like there's no before yet. Let's add a before down here. Before we want to invite, before do you want to invite a book ID of book ID and a user ID of user1 ID. I'm just going to be lazy here and just do that. Just use user1 instead of radar and twist books. Although, all right, you've convinced me. I'm content. Invite, we're going to invite a user. The query we want to execute here is this query. Thank you. The permalink we get back there is the book permalink, which is book permalink here. The user we have is radar. The thing we get back is book readers. And readers, like that. The readers that we should be seeing, we invited just the user1, so we shouldn't be seeing that. We should be seeing radar GitHub login and radar name for that. Okay, let's run that. Book readers spec RB. This is the request spec. Nothing registered with the key permission repo. Well. But for whatever do you mean? This is probably happening in the runner, or the run this file here. Do you have permission? You know what, I'm probably not registering it somewhere else in the import file. It's been so long since I had to configure any of this. This is injecting container. There's probably like book repo set somewhere. Yes, here. And permission repo set. This then reads from repo's name, which needs to be passed in from nothing registered with key. Okay. Permission repo, yeah. Try auto inject container. Container is there. Okay. It's been so long since I've had to add another repository. Just don't understand. That's not in TwistWeb. It would be in Twist. So I've separated out the back end into two different directories as well. There's Twist and TwistWeb. TwistWeb's all like the controllery stuff, and this is Nope. Nope. Nothing registered with the key permission repo, but there is certainly something registered with the key permission repo because it's defined here, permission repo. Where am I reading it from? Okay. Let's go to the source of the error here. You know what? It probably isn't permission repo. Let's try Bing console here. And we go twist import keys. Container keys. Keep doing ls. Yeah, okay. There is nothing registered with the key permission repo. It's repo repositories.permission repo. In close.rb you probably see no repo. Well. Is there something registered with node repo here? Not at the moment. Node repo. I guess it gets injected somewhere else at the moment. Very interesting. Well, where's node repo come from? Node repo comes from there. Oh, there's the timer. We'll keep going for just another couple of minutes. I want to get this done. Repo note, nothing registered with the key. Oh man. This is because I bragged, isn't it? It's because, like, look how easy it is. Nothing registered with that key, but there is in the context here. But it's not the context, it's the import. You know what, I'm just going to go ahead with the other import since that seems to be actually registered. Yeah, okay, that's better. Book readers spec. I'm missing a dot in this one. I'll have to look into that a little bit later on, the repo stuff. Why that's failing in that one particular case. There we go. So column users book ID does not exist. So this is the kind of error we were seeing in the other place as well. This is what is the error. The place where we're doing that is in the users table, the users relations, I should say. We're saying book ID is here. Now this is probably needs to be like permissions. Book ID is book ID like that, so it knows what table to correctly scope to. No, I did definitely change that just now. Excuse me. Oh, whoops! This is This is trying to join book ID on permissions to book ID and users. Okay. Let's see. Now that we've got this, so we go user, we go ID like that. Oh, it's so good when you make easy little mistakes like that. Hey, permissions boolean. Okay. So this syntax doesn't like this one now. All right, we'll try and revert that back and we'll see if we get a little bit further. Hey, yeah, okay, now it's doing the right query. Good thing we wrote that other test for it. So readers spec, this test is the one that stubs out the repository. So you can see that it's like got a couple of stubs here, and then book readers spec over here has the is like actually hitting the real database with like real users and asserting that the readers, there's only one reader in that database. Okay. Last thing to try is to refresh this page, wait for the server to come back up, and is the server crashing still? Wow. Content length header was 77, but it should be 144. Okay, well, look, we'll try again, hey? Computers. Man, they're always good for a laugh. Response. Unterminated string. Wow, it's like cutting off my content. You see that at the end there? Like, it's like it just gives up on returning data. Type blah. I don't know what that is doing. Why that is doing that. That is very strange. Okay, that's Apollo. I don't know if that's necessarily Apollo doing that, but what we can do here is like book, permalink, markdown, book, test, reader. This is on book. When we get book back, then we get some readers out of that, and then we have like a GitHub login, right? Hang on a moment. Undefined method ID for nil class. Okay, so the user in this case, the user ID that I'm passing is not valid. Well. That is an interesting issue that's happening there. This looks like the server is like half, like not returning the right amount of data or something. I'm not sure what's going on. That is very interesting. Invite a reader, like unterminated string. It's so what? Rack lint error. Content length. What is going on? It's from 2012. It does look like the data is somehow like content length header was 77, but it should be 144. Like the content length being sent by rack is wrong somehow, but only on this one request. Because if it was failing on every single request, what would be happening? I just realized I had this on the other window. What should be happening is, yeah. You know what I'm going to try? Did that just work? Oh my god. Did you see that? It worked. There you go. Okay. It's still doing a GraphQL call. I am extremely skeptical of that. Alright, something's happening there. I'll have to have a look at it. But it did show our list of readers, which is great. Just that. It's because I bragged. Never brag about code, because this is what it does to you. It gets you in a false sense of security, and it eats at you, right? Index is probably what I want. Invitations index. This one. You got readers here. This is in a flex. Like, why is this? That's a main. Okay, so it's a half that I've got it in. What I'm trying to figure out here is like why this is in. Yeah, it's double E wrapped there. That doesn't need to exist really. Even that doesn't even need a div. I don't think in that case. And then what you can do here is return that. That's wrapped readers, and now that's the right shape. Like, okay, so it's like gonna half work sometimes. Well, anyway, there's a list of readers. We have them. Next week, I guess we can finish off the kind of this interface where I can still type radar here and get the radar user here appearing, even though they're already a reader. And if we can do that, then we can look at some permission stuff. The rack lint stuff, that is so strange. You know what, I'm just for, oh my goodness. Okay, what's going on? Let's go ahead and like delete everything here, so there's like no readers for the book, and then that will mean that I probably can't load this page now or something. Yeah, you do not have permission to see that book. All right, let's add another one in 1 and 1 here. All right, I'm gonna save that one. Oh my god. Oh, Rack, what are you doing, Rack? What are you doing? All right. Whoops. I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. We've got the invitations feature now working correctly. We have a way of seeing the existing readers. You got to see the TypeScript automatically generating a bunch of different functions, or code generating a bunch of different functions like use readers query. We got to see some more backend testing, both with mocks and without mocks, and making sure that worked. A really good example there of a regression test. So there was a query that was failing that we then regression test over, verified the regression test worked, and then the query worked. If you kind of forgive Racklint a little bit there, I don't know what is going on. That is so strange. Anyway, that's it for today. That's 90 minutes of streaming on Twist, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.